All right. Details for Nintendo's next-gen console and Switch successor have leaked. Ooh.
A successor to the Nintendo Switch is inevitable. It's not a question of if, it's a question of when.
Yes.
And when you consider that the Nintendo Switch has been out for almost 7 years now, when you
Dang.
consider that sales have reached its apex and are beginning to decline,
Mhm.
it's fairly obvious that whatever this next generation console will end up being will be out in the not so distant future, with predictions being sometime next year. People
dang.
are still curious about what exactly
Really? So
it'll end
soon?
up being, what kind of form factor it'll take, what kind of power it'll hold. But for now, here is what we know. Back in May of 2000,
Okay, whatever Nintendo has in store, they have like a mountain to climb, because as far as I've been gaming, Nintendo has always been on the backside, like trailing PlayStation and Xbox when it comes to performance of product. Not necessarily, like, they're usually on the bleeding edge of like innovation of product, but not necessarily on performance. So like, what was it? The GameCube, the Wii U, so on and so forth. They've always had like some gimmicks or whatever that have actually benefited them and like make them stand out versus like the Xbox and the PlayStation. So I mean, nowadays, there's not really. What do we got? We got whatever PlayStation 6, Xbox, whatever the next name is. We got a Steam Deck, and we got the competitor to Steam Deck, which is like that Asus ROG thing that says it's like more powerful than Steam Deck. And then you got the Switch that's been around for 7 years, and then we have just regular computers. All right, so Nintendo needs to like. I'm curious. I want to see what Nintendo's going to do.
and 23, we did get a little bit of an update from news outlet Nikkei Asia, whose sources relayed that the next generation Nintendo console is progressing well, and that its launch isn't planned before spring of 2024. But aside from that, we've really had very little in the way of concrete
So after spring of 2024.
details about what the Switch successor will be. Well, all of that changes with this article from Video Games Chronicle, published on July 31st, 2023, titled Sources: Nintendo Targets 2024 with their next generation console. So rumors are beginning to line up, whereas Nikkei Asia said that the console won't be out before spring of 2024. Video Games Chronicle narrows the release window of the Switch successor further by stating that this is a console that will likely be out during the second half of 2024 to ensure that it has ample stock available on day one.
Oh, wow. So they pretty much already have the concept in mind, and I guess they're just waiting and just creating units, the chips and chipsets and all the other little knickknacks that it takes to make a console. That's what they're waiting on. So they already know what they want to do. They're just building up a stock because they believe when this thing drops, it's gonna go to the moon.
So that the Nintendo Switch successor doesn't suffer the same fate as the PlayStation 5 and Xbox Series X and S did.
Yeah, because like when those consoles first came out, they would drop. There would be like clothing drops or whatever. It's like, there's only 500,000 for this next drop, and then they would all get sucked up or whatever, and then the next drop would happen. It's like, another 500,000, and then they get all sucked up, and then there's 1 million. Okay, and then those would get sucked up. So it would just be like a slow trickle of consoles because of the just lack of chips and whatnot. So I think this is a good move for Nintendo for them to build up the stock,
which were plagued by such high degrees of shortages that it was really difficult for a lot of people to get their hands on these consoles. And with the COVID disruptions beginning to simmer down and the chip shortages beginning to diminish, hopefully it'll mean that the Nintendo Switch's successor will have ample availability when it launches, though demand being what it is for Nintendo consoles, it's entirely possible that it'll still be a struggle to snag a Nintendo next generation console.
And just remember, whenever a next gen console drops, however much the price is going to be for like the main price, not the fucking scalpers or whatever that just buy them and then sell them on eBay for like a huge markup or whatever. What was I gonna say? Shit. Oh crap.
During its launch period, especially. But yeah, this information comes from Video Games Chronicle sources, people with.
Oh yeah. Okay, yeah, I remember. Whenever the next generation of consoles drops, that company always loses money when it comes to like the profit margin on selling consoles. They only make money selling games. They don't really make as much profit from selling consoles because, you know, the exponential gain in technology or whatever.
Knowledge of Nintendo's next-gen console plans. Aside from a release window, it was stated by Video Games Chronicle, based on what they heard from their sources, that the next-gen console would be able to be used in portable mode, similar to the Nintendo Switch. So It doesn't sound like Nintendo's trying to radically shift away from the Nintendo Switch design and formula, because it worked.
Bro, it's going to be called Nintendo Switch Plus. Nintendo Switch 2. Bro, they're just going to slap a number on it. Nintendo Switch 2. That's what they're going to do.
Out so well, which I think is great. I think one of the defining features of the Nintendo Switch is the fact that you can both use it as a home console and take it on the go. It sounds like Nintendo's next generation console will be very much a follow-up, a sequel to the Nintendo Switch, rather than something completely new, which is fine by me. Frankly, the thing that Nintendo Switch needs right now is more power. The console just feels very dated, and while it can still output incredible looking games like Zelda Tears of the Kingdom with tons of incredible gameplay elements that makes you wonder how a game that looks this good and plays this well is able to run on this little itty-bitty tablet running on essentially mobile hardware, it doesn't change the fact that there are limits to how far you can push that kind of hardware, and we are starting to feel those limitations via some frame rate drops you might see in games like Tears of the Kingdom, or the fact that graphics fidelity just aren't able to be pushed as far as we'd like. Switch's dated hardware also makes it very difficult for developers to port over games made for more modern hardware like PlayStation 5 and Xbox. And not to mention that hardware prowess doesn't just affect graphics fidelity, it also affects game design, because greater hardware power also allows developers to be just more flexible with the kinds of games that they make and the kinds of gameplay scenarios they can come up with. And I also welcome seeing just how much prettier Nintendo games can look on more modern hardware. I mean, if Nintendo games can look as pretty as they do on the Nintendo Switch, imagine how good they can end up looking in the next generation console. Now, I'm curious if the next gen console will just be a more powerful Switch, or if there will be unique features that make it stand out even more. And I'm also wondering if Nintendo can capture...
Bro, instead of just 2 controllers on the side, they're going to have 2 more controllers on the top and bottom. So instead of a rectangle, it's going to be a square. You get a square, and then you can like rotate the screen and just play with...
lightning in a bottle twice. What made the Nintendo Switch so successful is that this concept of a hybrid console that's both a home console and a portable console, that was a novel new idea at the time. Now that people are familiar with that concept, I'm curious just how appealing the successor will be if it's just ultimately a Nintendo Switch that's more powerful. Obviously, Nintendo fans and hardcore gamers are down for that, but I'm curious if people who have already bought the Switch are willing to make that upgrade to the next-gen version of the Switch, or if the novelty of this concept of a hybrid console has worn off and the Switch successor won't end up selling as well.
Well, no, I don't think it's worn off, because you have things like the Steam Deck and the Asus ROG handheld thing.
Well, I personally think that if they output awesome games and if they price the Nintendo Switch successor just right, it has all of the potential to sell really well, especially if they go beyond just making a Switch 2 and implement some unique features that'll make the hardware feel like more than just a pro version of the Switch, but rather a true sequel that makes a significant jump in both hardware power, but also functionality. I'm very curious to see how Nintendo will try to make this successor to the Nintendo Switch stand out. They usually are thinking about ways to ensure that each generation isn't just better graphics, but offer something interesting and unique and something that's a little out of the box. So
More than 60 frames per second. Bro, I'm calling it right now. They need to have 120 frames in the Switch 2 or whatever. Bare minimum, they need to have 120 frames.
yeah, it should be interesting to see how that plays out. Now, one disappointing aspect that Video Games Chronicle learned about from two sources is that the next-gen Nintendo console, the Switch Successor, will likely launch with an LCD screen rather than the more premium OLED screen, a la the recently released Nintendo Switch OLED. And
Oh, they're already doing the thing where they sell you a lower quality one so that they can make room later for a slightly upgraded one. Like, it'll come out like in a year or two, and then in another 3 to 5 years, they'll come up with like Switch 2 Plus OLED 120 frames or 144 frames or whatever.
And if this does turn out to be true, I think that's quite a shame because for my eyes, there's a noticeable difference between LCD and OLED.
Yeah.
Colors just pop a lot more on OLED because of the higher contrast ratio. Not to mention that because of the way OLED works, where individual pixels light up, it does help save on power, especially in darker areas or scenes where a lot of pixels are turned off. LCD screens just tend to look duller, less colorful, less bright, and there is the potential of experiencing backlight bleed in the
Wait, was LCD the screen that you're supposed to use for performance, for like FPSs to get high frame rates, and then OLED was the type of screen that you needed to have shit just look good? Like, no one is trying to be competitive on like a Switch or a Switch 2. That is not the case. That's literally nobody. I don't know. I think they should have just stayed with the OLED.
corners and the edges. At the very least, I hope this LCD screen is 1080p and allows for 1080p portable play, though I guess then the question is just how much battery life would a device like this have? Would they be better off keeping it at 720p like the Steam Deck does? I'm also curious if the Switch Successor would take advantage of AI upscaling techniques like NVIDIA's DLSS to ensure that games can run at a good performance while allowing graphics fidelity to be maintained to a reasonable degree without pushing the Switch hardware too much, thereby maybe helping save on battery life and allowing the hardware to be pushed to its highest degree. As for why Nintendo would opt for LCD instead of OLED, it would be in order to help bring down costs, especially considering that the Switch Successor will have more powerful hardware, and that'll increase the cost of the device. On top of the fact that the Switch Successor will need to come with increased internal storage in order to have space for those higher fidelity games. Recall that without an SD card, the Nintendo Switch comes with a mere 32 gigabytes of internal memory.
Yeah, that's nothing. 32 is actually nothing.
In this modern day and age, for a AAA game, that would not be enough to even fit one game. So the Switch Successor definitely has to step its game up on that front and offer, I'd say at the very least, 256 gigabytes of internal memory. Now, the good news is that you won't necessarily have to install all of your games in internal storage or additional storage because the new Nintendo console will also accept physical games via a cartridge slot. Nintendo Switch games tend to have all of the required files within the cartridge itself, so you can just play directly from the cartridge. You might have to download a patch or two, but generally you don't have to install huge files on your Switch to be able to run games off of your physical cartridge. And just physical medium in general is something that is becoming more and more valued in this day and age, where we're seeing companies do a really bad job at game preservation. Or situations like what I recently reported with Ubisoft, where a small number of users have experienced their account being deleted because they were too inactive, with one case in particular
that was
from
a joke.
2021, resulting in that user losing hundreds of dollars worth of purchased games. So it's just great to hear that Nintendo isn't opting for an all-digital console or anything like that. There would definitely be a lot of backlash on that front. And yeah, it's
Nintendo putting their foot down on the whole physical versus digital thing. Like, yep, Switch 2. You're still going to have a physical thing that you can buy? Dang.
going to be cartridges, which I'm perfectly fine with. Curious how much storage size the cartridges will have. They would likely have to be bigger than the Switch's cartridges and their storage sizes, given how much bigger games are going to be.
Bro, I can't believe that cartridges are still a thing, even with if it's just Nintendo doing it. Like gone, like Nintendo has gone from cartridge, from like the NES and the SNES, the N64. They did the whole disc thing. They did the tiny disc with the GameCube. Then they went up to the normal disc, and now they're going back to the cartridges. That's so funny.
With the extra hardware prowess that will make the games just naturally much bigger in size. The cartridge slot also means that if you've bought physical games on your Nintendo Switch, you'll likely be able to take those cartridges and use them on the Switch Successor. While there's no confirmation yet whether the Switch Successor will have backwards compatibility support, I'd be shocked if it didn't, especially given that Nintendo did say recently that it does want to convert as many of Switch's 100 million plus user base as possible to its next system. This is something that Nintendo said back in February of 2022 in one of their financial results. David Gibson here, who is a Japan-based analyst and investment advisor, tweeted about the contents of the financial results, and among the things he discovered was a Q&A section where one of the questions was, how do you think that the current 98 million user base of the Nintendo Switch will compare to the next console? The answer that Nintendo provided was, into the 6th year of Switch, we are maintaining momentum. We're looking at how to expand and grow this 100 million users, leading into next-gen device. And then in parentheses, David put, sounds like the next device will be backwards compatible. Again, there's no official confirmation, but given that Nintendo's next-gen console will likely inherit a lot from the Nintendo Switch, given that it will be that hybrid console that will allow for both home console and portable mode. The fact that it does come with a cartridge slot, all of that seems to suggest that there will be a continuity between the Switch and the next-gen console. Now, apparently some third-party...
Okay, so even these guys are calling it like Switch 2. Yeah, like it's good that they have the backwards compatibility in from day one. Because I remember, what was it? Like one of the older Xbox or PlayStation consoles, it didn't have backwards compatibility for like a year or two, or was it maybe 3 even? And people were just like furious that they had to like rebuy games or whatever. And I guess Nintendo saw that and they're just like, we have to have backwards compatibility on day one. Oh man.
Publishers expressed that they have concerns that legacy support for Switch games could negatively affect sales of next-gen titles. I don't understand that mentality. PlayStation 5 is backwards compatible with PlayStation 4, but games are selling really well on PlayStation 5 because it's the best place to play the cross-generation titles, and we are starting to see PS5 exclusive games like Final Fantasy 16, which have sold pretty well for an exclusive. If you're making new games and those games are compelling and are taking full advantage of the new hardware and its new features and functionalities, then there's nothing to fear. People will buy those new games because, they're desirable. So as far as concrete details go, at least based on Video Games Chronicle sources, that's all.
New Super Smash Switch 2. Where the new Super Smash at?
We know. This next segment details an analysis from Tokyo-based industry consultant Dr. Serkan Toto, who told VGC that a 2024 launch for Nintendo Switch's successor would make a lot of sense, and I actually would agree with that. Again, given the fact that Switch sales are slowing down, and given how many years the Nintendo Switch has been out, almost 7 years. Here's an exact quote from Dr. Toto. I would generally say that looking at Nintendo's financials, it seems clear that it's time for a new piece of hardware in 2024. Hardware is already projected to fall 16.5% year-on-year in the current fiscal, while the minus for software is expected to hit 15.9%. The only way to stop these losses from totally ballooning next fiscal is a new device, and the second half of 2024 sounds like a realistic release window to me. Now, the analysts did express concerns about Nintendo's ability to be able to get the masses to upgrade to this more powerful, newer, shinier successor to Switch. The biggest competitor Nintendo faces is itself, says this analyst, although its core...
Nintendo is always in a league of its own. It's not really versing PlayStation. It's not versing Xbox. Those guys are doing their own thing against each other or whatever. Nintendo has its own built-in audience because Nintendo is the brand where it's more family friendly, and they have like their own like M-rated games or whatever, but it's not as peddled as much as on the Xbox and PlayStation.
Fans are eager for more hardware. It's more family-oriented casual fans who need more convincing.
Yeah.
What will the next Mario Kart offer that they're currently not getting from the current one, for example? Well, it's freaking Mario Kart. If you make a new Mario Kart game and attach a new number to it, people will buy it. And Nintendo tends to be pretty good.
And honestly, I would almost be hesitant to say that there's a lot of like just Nintendo games that are starting to just become like FIFA or Madden, and I don't know, like Mario Kart 23, Mario Party 18, Legend of Zelda Adventure into the Void or whatever. It's like it's more or less it doesn't really feel like a copy paste game, but like at the rate that it's going, I don't know, it's starting to feel like copy paste brands. I don't know.
Adding some kind of new twist. Like, it'll still look and feel like Mario Kart.
Yeah.
But, obviously graphics are going to look better. And on top of that, I imagine that they're going to add some kind of new gimmick that will add some kind of twist to the Mario Kart formula and gameplay that will make it stand out. I have no concerns about Mario Kart selling. It's one of those staple franchises that people will show up for, except that Mario Kart isn't some annualized game release a la, say, FIFA or EA Sports titles and whatnot, which are all basically the same year to year, and those keep selling really well. Mario Kart, every time there's a new entry, it actually feels like they put a lot of work and effort to ensure that it feels like a proper sequel. So when it comes to Mario Kart and those iconic Nintendo releases, I have no concerns about their sequels and their ability to distinguish themselves from past titles and push units, as long as those games turn out to be good.
Yeah, as long as the games turn out to be good. Because, I don't know, it's really hard to innovate, I would imagine, on just a racing game that you can have items that just shoot stuff. Like, the only racing games I enjoy is Mario Kart. And each one has, like, its own little new mechanic or two, that makes it different enough from the last one. I'm just, hoping that it continues to, like, get better. I don't want it to be Assassin's Creed, like that road, where it's just copy paste.
Finally, Nintendo has struggled to upgrade players in previous generations, so how it approaches things like digital libraries, the Nintendo account, and even backwards compatibility may prove crucial in the next system getting off to a strong start. I would agree with that. I think that continuity from Switch to the successor is really important, and if Nintendo can offer upgrades and patches to Switch games that allow them to run better on the new next-gen hardware, if they can make it so that games like Zelda Breath of the Wild and Tears of the Kingdom can run at 60 frames per second on the Switch successor versus 30 FPS on the Switch, I mean, that alone will be a big motivator for people to upgrade. So that.
Oh wait, is the Switch just right now only 30 FPS? Bro, that's crazy if that's true. Oh my god, I thought it would be at least 60. PlayStation and Xbox over here talk about 120. God dang, Nintendo need to make moves.
That their existing library of games can just be a better experience on the new hardware. And then, of course, the launch library of the Switch successor has to be top-notch for it to get off to a strong start. There has to be that like must-buy game on launch day if Nintendo wants to see sales have a great momentum from the outset, which is what this analyst said in this quote. If Nintendo opts for a Q4 release next year, I'd expect the company to have multiple games ready to go for launch.
Oh,
that
dang.
would be the ideal scenario. I think the Nintendo Switch launching with Zelda Breath of the Wild was a huge boost to its sales when the console launched. If the Switch successor can launch with a game of a similar pedigree that is just irresistible, that's first party, that you can only play on this Nintendo.
What would be a good Nintendo game to launch with the Switch 2? Like, I have no idea. They would have to come out with like a couple bangers.
Console and it's really good and takes full advantage of the hardware and highlights just what makes the console so special, then I think Nintendo will have very little trouble convincing gamers worldwide that this is the console to get, that this is the next hot thing in gaming. So yeah, I'm very curious to see what this next generation Nintendo console has in store for us. I'm curious when they'll actually announce it. But in the meantime, let me know in the comments below what your thoughts and opinions are on the details that Video Games Chronicle relayed in regards to what they've heard about this Switch successor, Nintendo's next generation hardware. What do you think Nintendo needs to do with this next generation console to make it successful? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and to be further updated on all things gaming news, reviews, and discussions, stay tuned right here on Young Yeah. I'll see you guys next time. Young out.
Oh man. I don't know what I would want to see. You think they would like reboot like Bayonetta or whatever? Like, aren't there like 2 or 3 installations of Bayonetta or whatever already? I don't know. They'd have to come out with like, isn't it like Mario Odyssey 2 or 3 or something? They'd have to come out with like another Mario game, Mario Kart, Mario Party. What else? Another Legend of Zelda, another Super Smash. Bro, how sick would it be if they came out with like another Super Smash? Like just on day 1 or whatever. And be like, that would be like some long, like that would be the long game if they were to come out with that on day 1. Definitely. I mean, because there's no way that, you know, they're going to come out with like another Smash like Ultimate. Like, they can't make Smash Ultimate 2 because the roster of Smash Ultimate is just monstrous. It's ridiculously huge. It's like the biggest roster you will ever have in Smash history. Yeah. But like, I don't know, we'll see. Bro, imagine actually imagine if they were to actually come out with Super Smash Melee remake or remastered, you know? That would be crazy. Because haven't they already done like remakes of games or whatever? Like, what if they just start remaking all their old games? You know, same mechanics, or just like update the graphics or whatever. Would that be something that like Nintendo fans want? I don't know. But yeah, I mean, it does sound interesting for whatever they got in store for the next gen console, but we'll just have to wait and see next year. But yeah, that's pretty much it. Another banger from Yong. That's it. All right, I'll catch you guys later. Peace.